Hello. This is my first video. I'm going to talk about uh, the evolution of React state composition. Technically, I'll go through you the history of how state is being composed in React. So I'll start with the ancient the mixin. Then we'll go through render props and finally go to the hooks today. You may feel like, hey, why you'll be interested to know all the history, because for me, many people when they first learn hooks, they feel like, hey, hooks is a bit magic, and they feel like, hey, why they have something that say, hey, hooks must always have a same number of hooks every time you render. So but for me, I go through the React from the old time until today. I actually hooks actually is a very big improvement compared to the uh old approach. Hopefully from this video you will learn how painful it was in React and how hooks actually improve our life as a React developer. This is application. I is a standard create React app. We import React and import React DOM, and now we just render a component which actually render now at the moment. Even though if from the screen you see nothing, if I type something, you will see actually it's being rendered. Okay, we will start with very old time when React first started. How do you create a component in React? So React have this create class function that you can just define a component with this create class. This create class accept an object. First, of course, you need declare a render function, and then you return what you want to render. Okay. You have to declare. You can declare a state. So here we're going to declare get initial state, which our initial state is just on, it will be false. Okay, and then you can declare your custom function. Here I want to declare a function called toggle, in which you will do set state, and then you take the previous state and it will return the of current state. And here if this state is on, I'm going to show you on, else I'm going to show you off. And then here I will render a button, which toggle, and then when on click, it will call this toggle, right? This React class actually is almost the same like our today React class component. It's just that React don't use a standard JavaScript class, so they have this utility create class function. So now I'm going to render this switch component here. Okay, so now I create toggle, then you on off. Okay, so now we haven't go to the state composition part. Now we are just declare a component. Now assume now this logic where we have a state that's on, then we can toggle it, is a very React. For example, many times we have a toggle like show some contents, or you have a dialog, then you can want to toggle on and off. So this is very common. So I want to abstract it away so I can reuse across many components. So how do I do that in React last time? So it's very simple. You can just create something called mixin. So call something called toggle mixin, and it's just a function object. And then here all our logic we can just cut and paste, and it move to a toggle mixin. And here create class accept a properties called mixin, and we can just pass in this toggle mixin. And now the functionality still works. So now we have abstract this logic. the state is out. And so in future, if I have another component that actually have a same logic, I can just pass this toggle mixin into the mixin properties, and they can just reuse. So now this is old time, very simple, right? An object, just pass in an object. But after that, right, there's a problem of mixing approach. You can imagine now I have a here, and it actually use the state on, and then it attach a toggle function here. But imagine, let's say this switch, I actually want to have two boolean, right? Let's say I have a two toggle within the same component. How can we achieve that? There's only one state with a on property. There can only be one toggle, so it's gonna be very hard for you to have a same mixing in a component. Besides, if this mixing is in another file, and you look at here, you will see, hey, where is this on comes from? Where is this toggle comes from? You can't really know from here. You have to go inside the toggle mixing and see what's the implementation details. Only you will know where this comes from. Now we only have one mixing. Imagine we have 4 of 6 mixins. This is gonna be very hard to debug and check, and that's why when React they deprecate the crate class, they remove the mixing support as well. So let's see how do we do in modern React. So let me remove all this old code. Now we're going to use the latest syntax. Switch extends rec component. Right. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit here. I'm gonna copy this and paste it here. And then state on false, right? We have a toggle, and they can do the same thing as the top. Okay, so this is a new switch, and it works the same. Now, just like just now, we want to extract our state from this component so it can reuse. How can we do this in modern React class? There's no longer mixing. So what do we do? So for us to do that, let me do some refactoring here. So here, instead of I'm going to call state toggle render, I'm going to have another utility called render UI. Okay, and I will just copy everything here and pass in render UI. And in my render, I no longer have this JSX. I just call this render UI. Okay. The next thing what I'm going to do is I want to make this render UI doesn't depend on our state and our method. So what I'm going to do is it will accept on, and it will accept toggle. So I need to pass this to here. On is this state on, and then toggle is this and here I have on, then I toggle. Okay, so everything is still the same, nothing special now. So but I want you to look at this render UI methods. Look at this. Everything inside here, it actually depends on the parameter of the function. That it actually doesn't have any access to our class component. So technically, we can actually move this out and put it as a file site. And then here we can actually call render UI, and it still works, right? But this is not very useful because it's kind of hard code to this function. But look at this switch now. Actually, now we no longer have any JSX. Is a purely the behavior of this toggle. So actually, we can call this toggle, right? Let's no. Keep it as switch first. So look at this render UI now. It's just hard code to here, but actually we can pass it as a props, right? So we can pass it, and then here in the props, what we can do is I'm gonna call render UI, and then I'll pass this function. Now things still works. So you look at here, actually this is no longer switch because this is just the logic of the toggle. Instead, I'm going to call this toggle, and then I have a component that's called switch. Right. Switch will be equal to toggle render UI and a function here. Okay. So now we have this component, and we have this switch component. Now you look at our toggle component, even though it's a class component, but actually it can be by another component in this way, right? So technically you have a props that's called render UI, and then it will receive emitter from this component, and you can render anything you want. So this is what we call as render props, because most of the time how it does is you have a component that actually render nothing, but then you accept a props as a function that will pass some function or some parameter, so that can render anything they want. So as a convention, most of the time they call render. So you see this actually in some popular libraries like Red Router. They also do the same thing. So render props is how can we extract out the state in the class Red class component world, and it is better than the mixin in a few ways. First thing is you can see the data flow is very explicit. For example, just now I mentioned in mixing, one of the problem is it will just magically attach all those custom methods and state into your. But here you can see exactly, hey, I have this on, and where does this on comes from? I have this toggle function, where does this toggle function comes from? Right? It's very explicit. Second thing is actually you can combine multiple render props in a single component. So just to show you how it works is, here I have a toggle, I can have another toggle, and then in this toggle I can render another time. So then I have this toggle, I can get on, and then I have toggle, I call this second toggle. So in here I can have the second logic on, off, and then I button. Which is calling the second toggle. So now within the same component, actually we can reuse this toggle render props component 2 times. which is not possible with mixing previously. So this is better, right? It is better in mixing because it's more explicit, and also because you can use it's more composable. The problem with rendered props, if you stay in write enough JavaScript long enough, you will know these things are ugly, and we have a name for this kind of style. It's called callback hell. Technically, this because you have a callback function with another callback function, and cause you to have a this very ugly nested tree. So this is but this is the best we can do before red hooks come out, and that's why the time we don't have and then that's why when red hooks come out, it is very exciting for us. So now I'm going to comment out all this again, and I'm gonna write switch component again, but this time we're going to use red hooks. So again, I'm going to copy code from here. Okay, so with red hooks, when we declare a state, we just reg use state, right? And then we have a on, then we have a set on. Okay, so have a previously is a method, now it's just a function, so we can set on previous on. Okay, so this is a switch component with red hooks. So now, just like just now, we want to extract this logic out so we can reuse it. So how do we extract those logic out in red hooks? Well, because all these are just function call, so we can just create a function. And then I can return them. And then I can remove this. And I'm gonna call here and then on toggle. Right, now it is a little bit like we back to our mixing times. We just cut and paste things out, and then we have a very simple component structure. We no longer have callback hell, and we have the good things rendered props as well. Now you can see, hey, where all this parameter comes from, where all these methods come from. And also we have another benefits of render props, which is we can use it multiple times. It's just that I just name it differently. Second toggle. So second on. Yeah, so we have all the good things that we had with render props, but we no longer have the ugly callback hell. And it's easy to understand. You doesn't need to know all these render props pattern. It's just function call. So that's all for today. What I've covered is I walked through you in the beginning when we have reg class, we would use a mixin, which is kind of easy to extract, but it's a bit hard to debug and keep track of where things comes from. Then we go to a reg class component, Then we have this render props, which is composable, not magical anymore, can track, but it's kind of create all these ugly callback hell component in your React code. And today we have React hooks, which actually make us extract state out is much easier and simpler, and is a very explicit, and it can use same hooks multiple times. That's all for today. Thank you. Bye.